One simply can't imagine what it feels like to be in Rika's position, as one who experienced timeline upon timeline upon timeline the way she did. For 100 years. There is no equivalent to that. And if there ever existed, we will never know. We went through quite a side story in Rika's life with Saikoroshi, arguably a very important one to the canon of her life, even after the true miracle she accomplished with her friends. We had a fun short little love story in the form of Hirokawashi and whatever the hell the other one was, but it is upon me reading this chart here that I am reminded that there are infinite worlds out there where the smallest of changes, whatever it may be, can lead to drastic effects. The butterfly effect, many worlds interpretation, all that fun stuff. And this chapter, Taraimawashi, is one of them. An actual timeline of similar caliber, beginning to end, to what we experienced through the main story, but with quite a few changes that ultimately will no doubt still end in the disaster of Hinamizawa, as Rika experienced it plenty. I even have the fragment right over here, and as you can see on the teeny tiny note tied to it, it says, "Warning, upon experiencing this fragment, you will witness a story with different choices that lead to an ending quite different to that of Onikakushi, Watanagashi, and Tatarigoroshi." Written by Kishiko Miyagi. Let's experience it together. Keiichi and the gang see the cottons drifting downstream during the final moments of the Watanagashi festival. He decides to sit near the river for a little while longer, while the others are going forward. However, not even a second later, we get a surprise visit from Shion of all people. It is established right away as soon as we see her that Keiichi knows the fact that she is Mion's twin sister, so no need to go through that whole "What? Twins?" from chapter 2. Shion decides, with hesitancy at first, to ask Keiichi if he believes in curses, which prompts her to tell him about the deaths that happen each year the day of Watanagashi. The couple that fell off a cliff down a stream below, the death of the Shinto priest and his wife, the death of the housewife and disappearance of a young kid, and even about the dam manager's death by the 6 employees. So yeah, in already a different spin from the early chapters where the likes of Takano and Oishi kickstarted Keiichi's fear of these spooky deaths happening each year, it is Shion here who is doing it first, like right away. Afterwards, Mion arrives, asking what they were talking about, and already her looking spooky and threatening at times, saying that nothing can be hidden from her. Hinamizawa syndrome kicking in right out the get-go. But that swiftly vanishes as the rest of the kids arrive back to find Keiichi near the river still, ending the tension and talking about all sorts of goofy stuff that happened. Like Rika attempting the shooting game with the rest of the kids in a competition, and using her baby-ish screams to manipulate the owner and gain advantage, which ends in Tomitake getting last place, with the punishment that each kid will scribble whatever they like on his shirt before he leaves for Tokyo. In similar fashion to the early chapters of the main story, once in a while we get new tips to read. One about the couple falling accident, written in extra detail, and about the death of the housewife, which the only thing it says is that it was never published in the newspaper. That's it. That's the only thing that the tip says there. The next day starts in the usual way we know for these lovely kids. Rena and Keiichi wait for Mion to arrive, as she was up all night cleaning up after the festival, finally getting sleep at 4:30 in the morning. They walk towards the school together. Keiichi tries to one-up Satoko by catching up the blackboard eraser that was aimed for him, but ends up getting hit with it anyway after he slides on an abacus, placed there by none other than the yellow rat herself, Satoko. We have another normal school day with Chie, followed by the kids going for another club activity with punishments involved, which is a game of deduction with cards, where in order to win, you have to guess the killer, the murder weapon, and the scene of the crime. It is a tougher than expected game for Keiichi, whereas for Mion, it is easy picking so far. Of course, if one cannot win easily at the club games, you gotta get rough. And that means cheating, ladies and gents. So Keiichi proclaims that he shall leave for the kingly bathroom for a royal flush, and sneakily getting Rena to go for a break as well after, so that both of them can discuss together on how to accomplish a win together, since surprisingly even Rena is having a hard time with the game. Then they shake hands and go in together with determination to win the game as filthy cheaters. But unfortunately, Chie tells Mion that she has a visitor, so Mion is next to leave the room for a while. My early guess here is that it is more than likely Oishi who visited Mion to ask about the death of Tomitake last night, unbeknownst to the kids yet. As such, it takes a while for Mion to come back to the game, so the kids decide to continue the game without her. Finally, an hour later, Mion comes back and indubitably she is in last place, because the rest of the kids accumulated so many points in her absence. Mion's original plan was to make someone else do her grocery shopping instead as punishment, so of course, since she lost, she's gonna do hers and everyone else's shopping for the day. Back home, Keiichi lets out a deep sigh that there is absolutely nothing good to eat. Combine that with the fact that his parents are not home today. But it's okay, cause Mion arrives at his house with his grocery bag for the day. Tonkotsu pork and ginger flavor cup noodles. And so Mion has to leave right after to deliver her huge list of groceries to the rest of the kids too, carrying bags in both hands as she creates tiny cracks on the ground each step with loud thuds, similar to hearing Godzilla in the distance walking. Of course, Keiichi, being the gentleman that he is, decides to help her carry some of that load, which eventually prompts him to ask about who visited her and if it had something to do with last night, wondering in the back of his head about the curse that happens each year after the festival. And this is met by Mion's icy glare of death and her fiery temper asking who told him about the mysterious deaths each year. Luckily, the ice was broken and the stove turned off as she realized that she dropped her bags by accident. And she's like, my bad, teehee, had a bit of a weird episode there, huh? But it's okay, we're all good. Bam! Guess again, sucker, I'm still terrifying. Stay the fuck away from Shion. And then her eyes turn back to normal and it is all good again. Guess again, bucka! Cut to nighttime, Keiichi gets a phone call, this time from Mion? Like this soon, just after they finish their errands? Apparently she wants to meet him at the Okinomiya library now and talk about something, which I do have to say this, it is something that I immediately thought as soon as we had this phone call. This is Shion for sure, the one who is speaking. We are going through the whole Shion pretends to be Mion phase that we have seen in the main story. I'm not saying this just because I was kind of expecting this, what with Shion's inclusion in this chapter, but it is a bit of a dead giveaway because here you see quote-unquote Mion being confused that they met up a little while ago, followed by Keiichi recounting that they went around carrying huge bags of groceries, and she's like, oh, right. So there is no doubt that the switch happened here. So we meet quote-unquote Mion, and inside, she decides to tell Keiichi about the curse of Ayashiro in detail. That Tomitake died the night of the festival, same circumstances as the main story, that everyone in the Sonozaki family is being investigated by Oishi because, just like in the main story, he thinks that they are involved in the murders. Next, she talks about the housewife's death and Satoshi's disappearance, and to put a nice bow on top, Mion makes Keiichi promise he would tell no one of what has been discussed here. And then wham! Rena jump scare! She was in the vicinity and met Keiichi just before Mion went away. Of course, she finds Keiichi suspicious for being here, not knowing why he would be here at the library, that he seemed to have been with someone here. Keiichi is like, I'm not doing anything sus. Are you sure? Yes. Alright, I won't tell anyone that you were with someone. Bye. Rena, wait! Cut to the next morning in class, Mion is nowhere to be seen for the day, and thus we end the day without any club activities. Keiichi and Rena go home together like usual. Rena asks him if there is something wrong, given that he looks quite down recently, followed by her wanting to cheer him up with pickles. Okay, and then Keiichi is like, pickles. I do like pickles. Tomitake looks like a pickle. Scratch and torn pickles on the roadside. I didn't want to be reminded of him like this. Of course, Rena is also thinking of Tomitake now, worried, given that she hasn't heard about him recently ever since the festival. And about the pickles too, she forgot to put pickles on her grocery list yesterday for Mion to buy, and there is no one to buy pickles for her. But don't worry, Keiichi himself will be in a pickle right now cause we have this guy. We go through the typical interrogation that he forces on Keiichi, asking about the man that disappeared on the night of the festival. And then Keiichi is like, I know nothing. I can't find any reason for why he would be killed by a pickle. Either way, Oishi also asks him about Mion and the kind of person that she is, making him afterwards ponder even more who she is and further creating this divide between him and his friends. And yes, I say friends plural right now because afterwards, Keiichi meets Rena at his home surprisingly. Very odd behavior to boot. You can tell she's super serious about this whole situation with the detective because she does her T-Rex pose. Rawr. This prompts Keiichi on an extra dose of Hinamizawa syndrome to think that Rena is here to check on him to see if he said something that would damage the Sonozaki family, that she's in cahoots with Mion, and that they're all after him. So Keiichi is like, nah fam, I am a bit tired, so bye bye. Another day passes. Keiichi is at his lowest emotionally, but while the thought of not interacting with anyone for the day crossed his mind, he also thought, wait, what about Rika? She is from one of the three families. She might also have a secret side to her, but maybe I can get some info out of her. Which leads to both of them having a private conversation behind the school. Unfortunately for her, it isn't a love confession. He cuts straight to the chase and tells her that he feels targeted, that there is something going on behind the scenes that puts him in danger. But Rika assures him that nothing bad is going on, and that as long as he did nothing wrong, then nothing wrong will happen to him. She even told him that his name was not mentioned at all at the last Hinamizawa meeting, since she also tends them as a representative of the Furude. Though, this leads to Keiichi having doubts on Rika's true nature as well. Can she read minds? What kind of divine powers does she have? Did he make a mistake talking to her? Rika, on the other hand, still sees him quite worried. And after this conversation, she feels tired, tells him that he is cringe, and leaves. Afterwards, with some courage still in him, he decides to actually have a talk with the main person he suspects the most, Mion. And thus they leave together home. He asks her why he was kept in the dark about the series of deaths for so long, with her answer being that she didn't want to worry him, given that he's still new in the village, but also she felt like telling it now so he wouldn't feel too uneasy later down the road. I do have to mention here that as far as I remember, her response here implies that they're talking about the discussion they had at the library, which was the only discussion that Keiichi and quote-unquote Mion had about it. And given that I'm 100% sure that one was Shion pretending to be Mion, it means without a doubt that this right here is also Shion. Furthermore, it means that Shion captured the real Mion and is imprisoned in the Sonozaki family underground caves. At night, Keiichi tries to go to sleep, but inevitably his head is filled with dark thoughts and doubts, reflecting on the true nature of his friends during quite an eerie sequence of horrific imagery, paranoia, and spooky sounds that I honestly recommend checking out specifically while reading this chapter, because they did a pretty good job here, a bit different from the way the visual novel portrayed the spooky moments during the main chapters. New OST to boot. After this, Keiichi gets a call from Oishi, telling him that Shion Sonozaki seems to have gone missing, last seen the night of the festival with him. Alright, I expected that, according to my theories, and how the early main chapters went. Next, Oishi tells him that Mion's whereabouts are now unknown as well. Again, not a surprise. It means that Shion has made quote-unquote Mion disappear after her and Keiichi had their last conversation as they went home together today. But what he says next actually catches me off guard a little. It is a piece of information that, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as my memory tells me, this is a first. That apparently this isn't the first time both of them disappeared at the same time. And according to Oishi, it happened last year after the housewife died. This makes me scratch my head a little bit. Let's talk about this right here. It could be that this could be a new direction towards a new sequence of events that could go against the typical things that happen in chapters 2/5. Is it possible that after Satoshi's disappearance, Shion right away confronted Mion because of her suspicion of the family? Can it be that this isn't the first time our Mion was caged up, except this time in 82 Mion was freed at some point later, and now she's captured again in 83? Or, if we're going down a drastically different path, although I have to question why, What if both of them are in cahoots? That instead of them being enemies, this time both Mion and Shion are suspecting the rest of the Sonozaki family. After all, while Mion herself acts as a leader more and more as she grows up, she's not the official leader yet of the Sonozaki family. Mion and Satoshi were friends too, after all. Maybe in both Shion and Mion's eyes, old Granny hid the mysterious deaths, including Satoshi's disappearance. And this is a timeline where Mion doesn't have as much faith in her family as she normally would in the main story, that instead of telling Shion to trust her family that none of it is their fault, she's like, you know what sis, fuck Granny, fuck the Sonozakis, let's overthrow the family together. Could that happen? So okay, moving on from that, another day passes, and at this point you would think that Keiichi just becomes increasingly lonelier and lonelier, not wanting to interact with anyone. And while I do believe that this chapter eventually leads to some disaster involving Keiichi not trusting his friends, combined with the Hinamizawa syndrome, we do have some levity. For one, as both Keiichi and Rana walk to the school, without Mion this time, he does find a moment for his soul to feel at least a little lighter than he was in recent days, looking around the village and realizing that maybe he has been overthinking things, putting on a big smile that Rena caught for a split second, leading her to tease him with it and both of them being back to some level of cheerfulness. This is immediately followed by Keiichi going inside the classroom, realizing, oh shoot, I forgot to check for Satoko's traps before entering. And the split second he thought that, a bucket of liquid falls on him. Now you would think that, alright, it's just water, it is no biggie. But nope, Satoko went far beyond that with spoiled milk. Ugh. With a thwack on her forehead and her friends not wanting to get any closer to a smelly Keiichi, he goes outside to take off his clothes and wash himself for what I assume is literally hours trying to get rid of the foul stench. And with that, the kids would continue their day, despite Mion not being there, with a club activity that would cheer their souls, Keiichi included, and continuing on with the thought that, despite these weird dark mysteries and negative thoughts clouding his mind, they will live on together with joyous hearts. So, obviously, one would think that since we had these nice moments of levity here, what follows next would be us going into the climax of the chapter by having Keiichi captured again by Shion, or him distrusting his friends even more to a point where he would kill them at the highest peak of Hinamizawa syndrome shenanigans. Cut to 10 years in the future, instead, where we see Oishi meet Akasaka at the airport. What? So yeah, it is after we finish this final scene of the chapter with both our lovely men that I realize, surprisingly this was a much shorter chapter than I anticipated after starting these console arcs. However, make no mistake, my fellow reader, this chapter will leave you with your heartstrings pulled all the way to the moon by the end of it in this final sequence, as after Oishi and Akasaka have their reunion at the airport in the typical fashion we've seen in the other chapters, they decide to visit the hospital to meet Mion, the one single known survivor of Shion's murder spree, and by extension, the Great Hinamizawa Syndrome. Which is an interesting detail to note here, well, we'll come back to it. Both men try to talk to her, Oishi specifically trying his best yet again to get something out of her to figure out what happened 10 years ago. But the effort once more seems fruitless, as she is completely mute because of her traumatic experiences. At least for a little bit. This leads to what I deem to be the highlight of this chapter to me. A moment that just rips your heart out as Mion finally says a few words, and I honestly wouldn't be able to do it justice by describing this, so I'll let you guys watch this sequence yourselves.
みんな、いい？始めるよ。
大石さん、これは。
どうやら園崎美代にとって事件以来完全に時が止まっているようです。
事件以来ずっと。じゃあ記憶は。
ミオンさんの証言が必要なんです。お仲間の無念を晴らすためにも目を覚ましてください。
罰ゲームなのかな。教えてよ。ねえ、ケイちゃん。
And so we conclude the chapter with that. Now, going back to a detail that I noticed in this. As we clearly see right over here, it does seem that the Great Hinamizawa disaster happened. Now, one would think, okay, well, what's the deal with that? We've seen that happen plenty. But I do have to keep in mind that we are talking about a possible timeline of chapter 2 and 5, where the Great Hinamizawa disaster did not happen. That is because in those timelines, Shion has murdered Rika as well, unbeknownst to Takano at some point. And because of that, because of Takano's initial mission of wanting to kill Rika herself, because Shion took that from Takano, it means that the disaster did not happen. But the fact that the disaster did happen in this means that some events have happened differently this time around, where Shion may have been involved in some murders and capturing Mion, but did not kill Rika in the process. So it is an interesting detail to note in that sense. This is clear evidence that while Shion and Mion are the center of attention in this particular chapter in similar fashion to chapters 2 and 5, the sequence of events may have happened differently. Now, of course, as expected of a chapter like this, it leaves us all with a bad taste in our mouths of the traumas and horrors of what the kids went through, especially with everything that we have learned from the main story. Because even after Rika achieved her true miracle, it is not to be forgotten that such events have happened in the first place, where such miracle was beyond the horizon out of our reach. And thus, normally it would suck for me to end this retelling of the chapter to you guys on such a sour note, but luckily there are two things to note here. For one, this is just another timeline where things went sour. We shall remind ourselves that at the end of the day, we have achieved a miracle with Rika in the main story in the first place. And thus, it is but a mere reflection of the horrific things that happened in Hinamizawa, as we experienced plenty till now, so we shall move on to the next Higurashi console chapters to find some levity soon enough. And number 2, we do have some tips to read before we finish this, which includes a fun little all-cast review of the chapter. We have the first tip, which describes in greater detail the disaster of Hinamizawa, as far as the public knows, given that it involves the fake story of volcanic gas eruption as a cover-up for Takano's murder spree that day. The second tip, well, we cannot read it, because as its title says right here, we can only read this after we finish Tsukiyotoshi, which, as far as I remember now, it should be the next console chapter that I will peruse next. As long as I will remember, we will come back to this after. And 3, let's tackle the all-cast review. We have Rena and the rest of the kids congratulating us for finishing the chapter in their gym clothes this time for some reason. Satoko is like, "What the fudge? This ending was way too abrupt and told us nothing," which is followed by them all discussing what the deal is with this natural disaster and the series of deaths. Their thoughts are that this chapter in particular is a result of Keiichi being a bit more passive than usual, which is a bit different than the earlier main chapters. In this case, him outright rejecting all of these weird negative doubts and being all, you know what, screw this. It's all in my head, so I'm gonna continue playing with the kids, which, arguably, it is a more peaceful way than how he ended up in chapters 1 and 2 and all. but inevitably that still leads to the disaster no matter what he did. Next, they discuss the inclusion of Akasaka, which prompts Rika to talk about him and express that their love story begins in the 4th chapter of the main story, Himatsubushi, and thus it leads to them promoting said chapter and what to expect out of it. Which brings me to the conclusion that what we read here is a chapter that technically we can read between chapter 3 and 4, if we wanted. Finally, we have everyone raise their glasses up and congratulating the reader for finishing the chapter. So yeah, I found this chapter to be a nice read. Before I move on to the next console chapter, like Tsukiyotoshi, I think that there are a few things to keep in mind that I think may end up being important later down the road. First would be when Akasaka points out the thing that has stuck with him as well, which is both Mion and Shion disappearing one after the other, specifically after the aunt died. There is something weird going on here, something new that I may have yet to discover. Second would be the alternate ending that I have to read in the tips after we go into the next chapter. Alright, well, that's about it. Remember, I am doing these videos out of my own free time. So if you guys feel like it, you can support my YouTube adventures into the world of Higurashi, Yumineko, and plenty of other visual novels I read by donating to my Ko-fi. It will be very appreciated. It will help me in my future endeavors plenty. Alright, well, time to go. Bye.